Resistance is the ability to resist change. I don't necessarily like using the word resistance, but it's kind of hard not to in this case because basically resistance in an ecosystem is the ability to stay the same or resist change. Now, the other term is, you know how they linked it, you said degree of resistance, and they linked it to high resistance, okay? Some ecosystems have high resistance, so they can stay the same. If eventually resilience comes in, you have to think about this. Resilience is if there ever is a disturbance, if they can't resist the disturbance enough, resilience is the ability of an ecosystem to recover. So a fire comes through, hurricane, flood, anything like that. If it comes through and they cannot resist the change because of what's happening, then it's how resilient it is. How much can it recover after that change or disturbance comes through? Now, this whole field of restoration ecology is based on resilience. So you can see they linked resilience leads the field of restoration ecology. If you're working in the field of restoration ecology, you're looking at how resilient ecosystems are and how they can bounce back from disturbances. Yeah, because if you think about like out west when wildfires go through, you would basically spend a lot figuring out how can we get it back to the point that if it wasn't a natural disturbance, how can we rectify it or get it? All right. The last important thing we're going to talk about is the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Basically means you want a medium level of disturbances. Thank you, Claire. The reason for this is because it creates more diversity in the organisms that are in the ecosystem. If you get a disturbance that comes through every once in a while, what it'll do is it will kind of shuffle the deck of the populations in the ecosystem. And that will create more diversity, which makes overall your ecosystem better. So you want a little bit of disturbance. You don't want none. You don't want a lot. You want a little bit, and that will help create the diversity you want in an ecosystem. Okay. I'm going to go next to the watershed studies. Okay. So the one thing that's very important to know about the watershed studies is the major study was Hubbard Brook. That was a major place that they went to study watersheds. And the reason why they study watersheds is they try to figure out what is going to be the effect of clear-cutting this watershed on nutrient cycling. Hubbard Brook, Hubbard. Brook. It was chosen because it had bedrock underneath. So it had a layer of bedrock underneath the soil. And what that did is it kept all the water and all the nutrients in the soil and not draining down into that big body of water underground where we store water. Think back to the water cycle. What do we call that body of water underneath the ground? Unconfined aquifer. Very good. Okay. Now, so they chose that there's bedrock underneath. There should be no deep percolation of water. So there's no water going into the aquifers. It all stayed above. And what they figured out was that when you clear cut this, and clear cut means to basically get rid of all the trees, they accumulated nitrates and the watershed was drained. Thank you, Megan. Clear cut means no trees. And when they clear cut it, right here, clear cutting of forests. Yep. And the whole reason, again, why you do this in watersheds is you try to help understand biogeochemical cycles, which is what the group in this class was talking about. We got to that point where watersheds, you're looking at how nutrients are cycling, and they looked at specifically nitrate, which would be the nitrogen cycle. And they looked at the water cycle, H2O, because of how the water was drained. Biogeochemical. That's the nitrogen cycle, water cycle, carbon cycle, phosphorus cycle. So if you want to study how those things are going through an ecosystem, you could look into a watershed like this and figure out how those nutrients are cycling through a watershed. And just so we're all clear, what is a watershed? Could someone define it? Okay, good. So it's important we know what it is. A watershed is where all the water drains into one point. Okay? It's where all the water from rain, maybe all where rivers, they all come together and it all drains into this watershed. So everything, all the water drains here, and with the water comes the nutrients. Last picture is going to be intrinsic versus instrumental value. Okay, so what you need to know are what are the different types of instrumental and intrinsic values. This group did a nice job. What they did is they labeled instrumental, and then they labeled the different types of instrumental. So you can have provisions. These are all different values of ecosystems. What do ecosystems do for humans? And there's instrumental values. So instrumental values include provisions, regulating services, support systems, cultural services, and resilience. Yeah, instrumental has more. There's more instrumental values of ecosystems than there are intrinsic, listed in the book. So they break down the book into different categories of instrumental values, and these are the different categories. So to give you an example of provisions, we have an ecosystem that is a forest. And provision says that there's goods in the forest that we can use. If you were to think logically for a second, what is the good that we can get out of a forest? The product that we can take out and use. Wood, lumber. That's a provision. Okay? Ecosystems also provide support systems. They do things that we can't do as humans. So there is an organism that lives in a prairie that can go around and pollinate all of the flowers and help pollinate crops. What's that organism? A bee. We as humans don't have that ability to go pollinate that quickly and that efficiently. So that's a support system that it provides. You could. Take a little bit longer than a bee, though. Finally, intrinsic value. Yeah, Kelly?
What does it say over environmental?
It says cultural or aesthetic values. So basically, cultural services means it provides something that is beneficial to the culture of a community. Like it might be an ecosystem or a type of land that is useful, needed, holy, whatever they might view it, or aesthetically pleasing, like it's the public loves the way it looks, they like the way that it helps out their home values, whatever it might be. Okay.
What is data regulating?
That it regulates the conditions, the environmental conditions. So it regulates how much water is being drained out. It regulates how much the nitrogen is cycling through. Go ahead. Anthony, same deal. Intrinsic is on a whole different level. This isn't talking about, oh, sorry, love.
How is cultural services not intrinsic?
It depends on if it has some value that is more than just on its own. So there's a benefit that is more so than just how it makes you feel. Okay? So it's a little bit of intrinsic, I guess, but there has to be a benefit that's not just internal. It has to be an external benefit. Intrinsic looks at, does it, like I was telling Lauren, does it make you, I know this is kind of touchy-feely, but does it make you feel good to go out to the ecosystem and look at it? Okay? And if it does, that's an intrinsic value. It just provides a feeling of happiness, or you have some internal need to protect an ecosystem. So you protect the animals. You protect it because your religion tells you so, or your philosophy on life tells you so, that the nature should be preserved. And that's an intrinsic value. Yeah. I'm also recording right now, so I'll post this video if you want to rehear the explanation.